If you're in the market for a PC, but you're limited by your budget, there are a few options out there for you. For one, if you live in a big city and there is a good amount of parts that are actually appropriately priced on Craigslist, that's one thing you can definitely do to piece together a PC on the budget. Sometimes it works fairly well, sometimes there's pretty slim pickings and people ask for way too much money for parts that are old. There are some problems with it. But if you're looking for a PC that's still fairly cheap, can play mainstream titles, at least the esports titles, and a few AAAs, and you're really not wanting to build too much of it, but you are willing to maybe look around and tweak things, well, today you might be interested in something that may be a good alternative that a lot of people haven't necessarily thought of. Today's video is brought to you by Audio-Technica. I'm doing a giveaway of their ATH-CKX9IS earbuds. To learn more about the giveaway, there is a link down below in the description. Make sure you check it out. So what is this mystery gaming device that you can get on the fairly cheap that will run things fairly respectable for the price? Well, it's appeared on my desk. It's the Alienware Steam Machine. Now, the Steam Machine, when it was released, was something a lot of people were concerned with and really not super impressed with. And I think the biggest reason they weren't impressed with it was because it was Linux-based, essentially limiting you to half the games of your library in Steam, and that's really just not going to cut it if you want to buy something that will play all of your games in Steam. It just didn't work. I don't want to blame anyone specifically on this, except for Valve, that they limited themselves, and for that reason, the Steam machines never really caught on for that. Because of this, Steam machines have unimpressed their owners and they're getting sold. And there's a few things you can do pretty easily to tweak it, to change it, and make it just a PC. For one, if you want to find an Alienware Alpha, it's got the same specs as the Alienware Steam machine, but it just actually comes with full-fledged Windows. And instead of a Steam controller, it comes with an Xbox 360 controller. And you can find those used, but they'll probably be a little bit more than the Steam machine because A, people probably held on to them because it's just a PC, and B, I think that controller is better than the Steam controller because the Steam controller is, once again, kind of crap. It works well in certain situations, but it's not the best for gaming. And let alone, you're really just going to want a keyboard and mouse. But the Alienware Steam Machine can be found on eBay, at least in some of the lower configurations, for less than $300. I mean, a lot of them sell for around there and a little bit more, depending on how it's spec'd out. Now, we should talk about the specs of the Steam machine. There were the i3s, i5s, and i7s, available with 4 gigs or 8 gigs of RAM and a 500 or terabyte hard drive. Now, the one that I actually have, because they asked me to review one a while ago, mine's an i3 with 8 gigs of RAM and a 1 terabyte hard drive. That is the minimal one I would ever go with for a couple reasons. A, you want at least 8 gigs of RAM. Just from using the device, I know it wants it and it needs it, and just go with that one. Terabyte hard drive is going to give you way more space and room for games and future growth if you're installing stuff. I just think it's better. You could do 500 obviously if you wanted, but it's really 8 gigs of RAM. And if you actually were out there looking for one, I would preface to get the i5. The i3 actually isn't terrible, but it does start to run into a few little issues in a few games. It just could use more power. It's just an older i3. So I'd go with an i5 if you can find it, mostly get that 8 gigs of RAM. You can go in there though and swap out the processor and the RAM and the hard drive all fairly easily in this device. It's not very difficult. But if you don't want to screw around with that, then don't worry about it. Although there's one thing you will need to screw around with if you do go get a Steam machine. What I did with mine, because I got tired of not being able to play any games on it, was I took out the hard drive, I reallocated it, and I reinstalled Windows to it. And with a couple little minor tweaks in the BIOS, I believe, it was a while when I did this ago, essentially then I just converted it over to a PC, which opened up my Steam library where I could play not only half my games, but then all of my games. I could install League of Legends to it, I could install Battle.net to it, and pretty much anything else I wanted, and had a full working Windows. So it works way better and essentially became a very cheap, incredibly small packaged PC that has some really nice benefits and a few downsides too. I mean, for one, when it comes to future expansion of this device, yes, we can change out the RAM, the hard drive, and the CPU. But the problem we're running into is we can't change the graphics card. So what you have is what you get. And it's not a specific card from NVIDIA. It's a custom card that they put in these. It does have 2 gigabytes of GDDR5, which is an okay amount. But it's similarly related to, if I might be correct, I might be wrong here, an 860M, which isn't the greatest card in the world and really more of a mobile card. But nonetheless, you know, that's what it is, and it'll play games fairly well, just depending on the title, and we'll go over numbers in just a second. So you will be limited by that, but you can just use it basically as a small PC in a bedroom if you want to later on in life, and use it as a streaming machine for like Netflix or whatever, but it's a very small, compact device. Few things you run into problem-wise. On the front, you have 2 USB 2.0 ports. On the back, you have 2 USB 3.0 ports. So you have 4 USB ports. There technically is one in the bottom as well, but that's for the USB dongle for the Steam controller. But really, a mouse and keyboard, you're going to be taking up half your slots, and then a headset might take up another one too. And you will need a headset that is a USB headset because there are not, you know, your 3.5s for your jacks on this, so you're going to run into a problem there. On the back of the device, you also run into a few problems too, depending on how you look at it. You do have a HDMI in and out, but that's what you'll be running, HDMI. So you can't run DVI, can't run DisplayPort, VGA, none of those things. It's HDMI, which luckily HDMI is pretty much on every monitor or TV, so you should be okay there. You do have optical audio, you do have an Ethernet port, and then of course you have the power. So you are limited a little bit, but for the most part it will play games. And the games we need to talk about it will play, well, let's go over a list and see what their FPS numbers were at. First thing we ran was Overwatch, and it wanted to run it on its default high setting, which is the middle setting actually in Overwatch, and it ran at an average of 68 FPS, which honestly is pretty good for a newer game. Overwatch isn't the craziest looking game, and it on high looks fine, honestly, and it played very smooth, so very content with the numbers we saw from Overwatch. Next, we actually ran Fallout 4 on medium. And it struggled a little bit, but it did okay. It kind of averaged in the 40s most of the time. 44 was what the average came up with. When you're inside places in Fallout, it would hold at a 60 FPS because the outside world's just so much harder for it to load. And then sometimes in fights or in big open areas, we'd be dipping down into the 30s. But I never noticed anything in the 20s, which is pretty good and not too bad. Next, we ran Dirt Rally. We ran Dirt Rally on its, it wanted to run it on medium with 2 times MSA, so we let it run it on medium because that's what it wanted. It averaged 85 FPS with a high of 105 and a low of 62, which is actually really good and fine. It's going to work and run fine. Next up was GTA 5. We did the benchmark testing and we took the averages from the different areas. The average that we actually had for it on its absolute lowest settings in GTA, and I mean moving everything to as low as it'll go, gave us 75 FPS as an average with a low of 32 and a high of 103. Just happened to ping at that for one bit. We did actually then jump in. I wanted to play it to see how long it would run it and see how well it would go. And it ran the game fine, more at an average of actually in the 50s when actually running the game. The CPU temperatures were getting very hot. The device does get hot just in general, but it'll keep playing because it knows it's going to get warm, so it doesn't shut off or anything. But it got very hot. We were talking close to 80 degrees Celsius on the CPU at a few moments. So it does get warm while it plays that game. Then we ran Rise of the Tomb Raider on its lowest settings, and we got an average of 45 frames per second, which is okay. I jumped in and then did play the game as well for a little while, and it ran the game fine. The game looked kind of funny without anything on it, but it would play the game at 45 FPS, which really isn't terrible. And then when it came to your other just kind of out there titles, we got League of Legends at over 100 FPS. Hearthstone was playing at a constant 60. Counter-Strike played just fine too. I can't remember the number off the top of my head. I should have wrote it down, but it played the game silky smooth because Counter-Strike's not that really hard to run. And then Dota I didn't try, but I know based off of those other numbers, you'll be able to play a game like Dota fairly well too. So your esports titles will all run on it quite fine because none of them are crazy games when it comes to graphics. They're all pretty old at this point in some comparisons. So it really can handle most things fairly well. And like I said, you can find one of these for under $300. So get yourself Windows, install it to it. If you can figure it out, because it does take a little bit of patience and practice if you don't know what you're doing, or find a friend who knows what they're doing, or find a YouTube video that will show you and instruct you on how to do so, because I guarantee it, more than just me has installed Windows to their Steam machine to make it not the Steam machine any longer. But I think it's a decent option if you are looking for a PC in that price range, especially if you're really only playing things like Overwatch, Hearthstone, League of Legends, Counter-Strike, some of these games that really don't take tons to run. You're going to be able to play all those perfectly fine, and they did play that perfectly fine in a actually quite small and compact package too. So, I mean, it kind of works out. So that's just about it. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them down below in the comments. Make sure that you check out the giveaway. You should do it. It's a giveaway. It's free stuff. Why not, right? Other than that, though, let me know if you actually end up doing this and if it works out for you, and if you actually get to do it with an i5 or i7 version, because that will just run better in general. But other than that, I'll just see all of you guys in the next video.